All right, good morning, Environmental Subcommittee members. This is sort of an experiment to have our meeting at 11 o'clock, and we'll see how it works. And thank you to Kristen for getting out the amendments and the marked up bills. And we will start with House Bill 76. I think last time we looked at amendments that had been, Kristen, remind me, these are sponsor amendments?
They were sponsor amendments.
Delegate Love had introduced. But then Delegate Zotto and Anderton, I think you had held the bill because you wanted to opportunity to check with MML. So wanted to circle back with you about that. Any remaining issues or concerns?
I was looking at another bill for today. Forgot we had to go backwards for go forwards. My fault.
No problem. Yeah, House Bill 76. This is the
My understanding was, and hopefully somebody's watching and will text me with this, that there was confusion. MML still had some issues, but I don't know if it's enough to stop the bill.
All right, is there someone from MML who's on the call?
Let me hold on one second here. I'm gonna send a text right now.
Okay.
Yeah, to the new Candace.
Well, Delegate Anderson is checking. Anyone have any questions about this bill or the amendments?
Well, I still don't think the amendments fix the bill or by any means, and I just see it as an expansion and a threat to the municipalities and the local government. So I'm just going to vote against it. But that's
okay.
I'll just point out one thing that I was concerned about, and I think I'm still trying to get clarity on, and I'm more so leaning towards supporting the bill. But the standing piece. I understand standing, and I understand that whenever you are determining whether or not you have standing, you look to this act. And my question is, because it is a federal act, if a person is seeking standing, will they only be able to use precedent law that is based on the act itself, or any federal precedent where someone is gaining standing? So that's my concern and question, is more so like making sure that it's narrow and that the standing is only being created through the act versus like the federal law as a whole and how you gain standing, if that makes sense. I don't want to make this too long of a legal, I don't want to turn this into a civ pro class.
all right.
Well, Delegate, if you like, I think the advocates are on the call. I could ask them to.
Yeah, I just want more clarification. Like, can someone, I understand that they're getting standing through the act. The act is giving them the authority to have standing. But in order to obtain standing, often courts are going to look at precedent, cases, and matters to determine, okay, let me see if these facts give you standing. And whenever they're looking at precedent or prior cases, are they able to look at all prior federal cases in which someone's getting standing in this circumstance, in which an act is similar to this, which I'm worried that, a creative lawyer will do? Or is it something where you're only going to get the standing via only through the act and prior cases that are only on point with this act?
Sure. Yeah, Delegate, the way I read the bill, but I will ask the advocates to explain as well, is that someone who has to meet the threshold standing requirements under the Federal Clean Water Act. So right. I guess it's as those standing requirements under the Clean Water Act have been interpreted would apply to determine if someone could intervene in one of these cases. But Jen or Betsy, if you're on the call.
Yes, I'm happy to answer. And Delegate Stein, what you said is exactly correct, that it would be restricted to Clean Water Act cases. And the reason it has to be the federal standard here rather than a state standard is because there is not a cause of action to bring a lawsuit for a citizen group under state law. So that only follows along with the federal Clean Water Act and its delegation down to the state. Under the State Water Pollution Control Act, there is no analogous citizen suit provision. So that's why we have to use the federal standing for it, but it is specific to Clean Water Act cases and has a lot of requirements. You have to show an actual injury, that it can be redressed by the court, that it's in the zone of interests for this law. So does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I'm just, I'm thinking, in my time as an attorney with really, really thoughtful and creative lawyers, I'm just trying to reduce the opportunity for there to be an expansion of using other court cases, other federal law to create standing. And I think the language of the bill, and based on your explanation, I feel more comfortable that we won't have an increase or the use of creative law to get more standing that's not really there. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my understanding also.
And Delegate.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify as the non-lawyer also that this legislation doesn't expand whether or not who has standing. It just says if you have standing under this current federal law and the state is doing an enforcement action, then you can intervene.
Right. Right. And again, this is just for purposes of intervention in a state case. Right. Okay. By the way, I understand that MACO has dropped their opposition to the bill. Okay, and Delegate Anderson, did you got an answer from MML?
Yeah, they've all moved to no position.
Okay.
I think they have decided to move their resources to support another bill that we'll be hearing tomorrow with how we use our revenues. Maybe.
Okay, so stay tuned for that then, right? Okay. All right. Kristen, at our last meeting, did we adopt the amendments?
Yes,
Okay.
amendments were adopted.
So we have before us the bill as amended. I'll move the bill. Second. Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, opposed? Let's see, I need to, okay, bill passes. Thank you. Okay, let's jump to House Bill 333, Delegate Clark's bill. And Kristen, could you remind us where we are on this bill?
Let me get, I have that one out. Hold on. This was the bill. So last night I sent out 2 emails, and so the amendments for House Bill 333 are in 2 separate emails. Does everybody have those? I can bring them up on the screen. My notes actually aren't clear. I know we spoke about the one amendment that would restore current law as it with respect to the exemption for state employees performing the marine contractor services. I don't recall if I brought up the other amendment that would have altered the types of services that a local employee could perform without obtaining a license.
I think you did, but why don't you go ahead and mention those again?
Sure. Do you want me to bring them up on the screen or just describe them?
I think just describing them is fine.
Okay, so the First Amendment, so under current law, a state employee can perform certain marine contractor services without being licensed by the board. And the bill as introduced would have taken that out and then just limited state employees to the list of services that are included in the bill. And so the sponsor's First Amendment would restore current law with respect to that exemption that applies to state employees. And then the second amendment would alter the types of services that a local employee could perform without being licensed. On page 2 of the bill, it would take out lines 21 and 22. So it would remove the ability to perform the construction of a tie gate designed to prevent the encroachment of salt water. On page 2, line 23, it would take out replacement activities that are listed there. And then in lines 27 and 29, that is also taken out by the amendments, but that relates to the de minimis activities that would have a de minimis risk to human health or the environment.
Right, and that's that last amendment was that MDE brought up because they were concerned by taking it out that they would have to provide a lot of certifications for local employees, for which MDE is not paid a fee. So they were concerned
Right,
about.
under the bill is exempting employees from local employees from having to pay the fee. So this would mean they would cover, the MDE would have to cover more
Activities
fees for the licenses. Yeah.
Right. Tyler, are you on the call? Okay, so maybe if you want to, you may have done this last week, but could you just re-explain MD's position on that last point?
Sure. So if you were to remove de minimis from the legislation, then there would be a very narrow amount of activities that somebody could do under this anyways without receiving a license from the state. And so for every license, the state would have to pay $575 or cover $575 from the licensing fee, and then $75 in hard testing materials. And so with that narrowed scope of things that are exempt, then that really expands our risk here of having a lot of expenses to the department. And so we would like to keep the de minimis activities. These activities would be up to the Marine Contractors Licensing Board. So that would have a full say from the board of what activities can and cannot be included. I provided Kristen a list of the activities that would be included as de minimis, or things that the board would deem to be de minimis. Those are small things like replacing decking on a pier or boardwalk, to the seasonal installation of sea nettle nets. A lot of things that a citizen could do under an existing permit on their own anyways without a marine contractor. So I'm trying to allow the counties and locals to do those themselves.
Right. Okay. So you would prefer, again, that language on, this is the interlineated copy, page 2, lines 27 to 29, to stay in the bill as opposed to be taken out.
We would like that. And also we would be open to including the list in regulations so that there was a hard list that everybody could see. We're currently drafting regulations for our marine contractors licensing levels that was passed last year. And so we're already working on marine contractor licensing regulations, and this is something that could be included if wished.
All right. I mean, personally, I think that, given MDE's concerns, which I think are reasonable, I would propose that we put that language back in. But any other feedback from committee members?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe Chesapeake Bay Foundation opposed this bill. I was interested in hearing their perspective on the amendments, if they're on.
Yeah. Is someone from CBF on the call? Yeah, I will say, and Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, that these amendments, these sponsor amendments, were worked out in consultation with CBF. So I don't know the particular rationale for the one that we're talking about, the de minimis exemption. But I know the other ones were worked out between the delegate and CBF. But I can't say what the position would be if we restore this language.
So I'm looking now at their letter and it says the exemption of de minimis services creates uncertainty. The lack of an explicit list of activities in the third category creates uncertainty. The board would need to determine what is de minimis without considering site-specific conditions. So I don't know, maybe they would be open to listing those in regulation. Wait.
Yeah, it sounds like the board does have a list, and so Tower, you're saying that you'd be amenable to putting it into COMAR?
Yes, so we have a list that was voted on by the Marine Contractors Licensing Board. It's 16, 17 different items, and we would be amenable to including that in our regulations.
Okay. How does that sound, Delegate Ruth?
It sounds okay to me. If they're not here, I can't ask them.
Okay, all right. Well, because we've been talking about this bill for a number of weeks now, I will move my amendment that would restore the language that about de minimis to the bill. Kristen, did we adopt the amendments to House Bill 333 last time?
Can you repeat that? I don't know if it cut out.
Yeah, did we adopt all of the amendments on 333 last time?
I don't think we adopted any of the amendments.
Okay. So what would be the procedure here? Should I move the amendments with the exception of that last amendment that takes out the de minimis language?
That works for me. It's if that's clear to the subcommittee, that works for me. I mean, I think there's no set rule. It just depends on the complexity of the amendments. I think these are pretty straightforward to combine them with your your amendment.
Delegate Boyce, did you have a question?
I do. I wanted to go off of Delegate Ruth's question and Tyler's question about the list. You said the board just approved the list. I'm wondering how often is that list reviewed and updated?
So as it's not currently in regulation, we do not have a running list of de minimis activities. We actually created a list of de minimis activities.
I understand that, Tyler. What I'm asking is that if we put this in, that list into law, what I'm asking is how often does the board then review to either update or remove, therefore by having to then update the bill itself? So in other words, is this list like a standing list, like it's never going to change? They're never going to be more or less?
I would say that it would be a fluid list. So having the language in the legislation read to be the de minimis activities, and then in regulations, we would have that list of de minimis activities. So that is more fluid to change regulations than to come back to the legislature to change the statute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about the amendments as I'm proposing them?
Yeah,
Well, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chair.
Yes.
I know this bill was already held once, but there's just so much confusion going back about the amendments. And I just wondered if we could hold it again so that I could check with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay. Yes.
do you want to do some amendments today and then hold it before final action?
If you adopt the amendments, you could still, amend the amendments at another meeting, and then I can combine them together so they're all in one document, one reprint.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay. So, Delegate Ruth, are you okay with the version of the amendments as I proposed it? Taking out the de minimis?
I don't know, but as
Okay.
Chris said, we can go back and amend again if we need to. But
Okay.
I don't.
I'll
wanna
move
hold
the
progress-
amendments.
I don't want to hold progress up too much.
Okay. So Delegate Otto, are you saying the amendments as I proposed them?
I move them as you proposed them.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of the amendments say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. All right. So we'll hold the bill. And let's please work out any remaining questions about this bill.
Thank you.
Sure.
And we'll have a reprint to see
Yes.
what we've done?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now let's go to House Bill 204. Just for everyone's information, 204 and 264, I think each of them require, or there'll be a fair number of questions and comments about them. So it's my intent not to consider any motion on them today, but just to have some discussion. Then hopefully time remaining, we'll get to 407. All right, so House Bill 204, DNR and MDE complaints, inspections, and enforcement requiring, the posting of various variety of information. Maybe, Kristen, why don't we start off with the sponsor amendments for 204?
So the sponsor submitted amendments in her testimony, and instead of referring to a suspected violation, it would strike suspected and substitute alleged. So if the bill refers to alleged violations. The amendments define complaint as meaning a complaint regarding an alleged violation of any air or water quality requirement in the environment article, including associated regulations and federal requirements delegated to the state. And the amendment would also require that electronic records be kept for 10 years.
Okay. And has any party submitted amendments, at least as of now? Anyone else submitted any additional language? Kristen?
So not from, we don't have like a draft language. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I know MDE, you had, Tower, you had some questions and or issues with the bill. So Tower, if you could come back on.
Yeah, sure. So I had worked a lot of hours with the advocates to try to come up with something that we were okay with. And I thought we had an understanding where they were going to move forward with what we had discussed. And then when I saw the amendments last night, I saw that only one of the things we talked about was included, which was the amendment where suspected is alleged, because that's just technically how it works in the environmental article. And just to give everybody a little bit of background, so we are actually working on a online portal to where most of this information will be online already. That portal will be done for all of our water programs that are on ETS by October 2021. So this year, similar to the LRCA database. And then we're working on getting everybody else online by mid next year. That's on ETS. We also have multiple other portals. So we're really making a push to be more transparent and have a lot of this information online. So I would argue that we're okay having these timelines set in statute. I and the department feel as if this legislation might not be necessary, as we are working in this direction already. This is time consuming. It does cost a fair amount of money. And so us being able to move at our pace definitely helps with the fiscal ramifications of these changes. Also with the suspected / alleged violations, we aren't comfortable having that in the bill still. And so those are, every complaint that would come to the department would be online. And so these later on down the line will be online in the form of an inspection report. So it'll be complaint, and then it'll be what actually occurred and what has happened. This would be before we do any work, we would have to tell everybody what was submitted to MDE. We don't collect these in the same way as the inspection report. So changing some things internally makes it a little more difficult for us, but all suspected violations will be in a inspection report that will be online. So we're not hiding information. It's all in the spirit of transparency. It's just when that information comes out and how much additional information the public should have along with that complaint.
Okay, so your concern is both twofold in terms of the timeline in the statute and what's reported, that all complaints.
And also, and also the legislation would require us to have all programs online, and we really can't do that. And so like our radiological health or trade secrets for x-rays. There's some programs that are HIPAA, that are protected under HIPAA. So as drafted, there are quite a few concerns.
Had you, in your discussions with the advocates, proposed amendments to the bill, or had it just been more in the concept?
So I did not propose line item amendments as I thought that these were getting incorporated. I proposed all of the information that I had sent you earlier. That was what I had expected to see when I received the amendments. So I don't have line items. I can draw up line items, but I did have those concepts.
Sure. No, I would encourage you to draw amendments to the specific language of the bill. But while Tyler's on the call talking with us, any subcommittee member have a question for MDE?
I do. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm making sure I use the raise hand function. So, Tyler, what I guess what I think I'm hearing is you're saying that that you by 10/20/21 will have the system in place for which the legislation is creating?
So we will have half of it.
And the
so
half,
our water program is on ETS, which is the environmental platform that we are using. And so we will have all water programs that are on ETS online by October 2021. We're actually almost done with our with one of our programs, and I think we'd be happy to give you all a test run if you'd like to see it one of these days, and we can set up another meeting so you can see what our portal looks like. Our IT has been working really hard on trying to get that done. There's a lot of back office coding that has to go on with getting these online, as well as we're using the ETS platform to generate data for reports. So working on the portal, working on reports, trying to get everything done in a reasonable amount of time. But all water data will be online already by October of 2021. And then we hope that our air programs will be online by the following year that are on ETS. But we will have LRCA, which is the lead registrations, by October 2021, which has already been discussed with the committee multiple times.
so water and lead will be online for sure by 10/20/21. And then you said the air system potentially by 10/20/22.
Yeah, and so that is true, except for our water supply is not on ETS. And so they have a different platform. And so we won't be able to have water supply. And I have a list where everything is broken down with timelines and the different reasons why something couldn't be online. And I'd be happy to share that with everyone.
Yeah, so I think to the chair's point, like those specifics would be helpful as far as amendments. I personally don't like duplicative work, or, you know, if you're already doing something, I personally, and you can guarantee that it's done, I would prefer personally not to then quote unquote legislate it. But if you're not doing it, then, you know, kind of we legislate it. And I do understand the fight of system talking to system, and this system doesn't talk to this one. And I think Department of Natural Resources may have the same issue of kind of like the systems talking together to then have something that we can all see to be able, for transparency's sake. So that would be very helpful if you can get that to us so we can kind of make sense of this. Thank you.
Sure. And so and just for background, we've spent millions of dollars converting over to this ETS so that we could have public facing portals. So even last year when the similar legislation was in from the delegate, we were already working on this, and we've made a ton of progress up until now. So yeah, it is definitely something that we want to do and that we're really trying to get done.
Right, thank you. And one concern I do have is the kind of presumed to be guilty before one is actually tried. And so that kind of worries me, and that, like, you know, it's like when I get a citation from the city because I didn't cut my grass, and yet the day I get it is actually the day I cut my grass. So it's on there as that I didn't cut my grass, but in fact, I actually didn't I did cut my grass, right? And so I am worried about kind of that type of issue being out there for transparency's sake, and then I get to blame an individual for an alleged allegation that actually hasn't been fully investigated. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from subcommittee members? Yeah, Delegate Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Tyler, the bill, how does MDE handle the suspected violations compared to the convicted violations?
And so we would have a suspected violation come into the department, and then we would have a inspector visit the facility, in which we would then determine if there was or was not any violations. And then those would then be reported on our inspection report.
And so under the bill, would suspected violations, I mean, how specific would those be?
So the suspected violations in the current legislation, I had to see how specific they are. I know there's a list of what needs to be listed on our site for them. I can tell you. And so it is. It would be a list of new complaints that have been received by the department with information on the county in which it has occurred. The administration of the department is authorized to enforce the suspected violations, complaints that remain open, and the complaints that have been closed.
So it's by county.
That would be part of it.
Okay. And can I sort of ask a similar question? For DNR, I see DNR's on.
Sure. I mean, James, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So you have a specific question about how our report would work, or because we had submitted a letter of information expressing a little bit of concern. One of the main thrusts of the proponents' request is that DNR report on aggregate convictions data. We have been waiting quite some time for the judiciary's MDEX system to come online to be able to report that data, and to try to do so without that system in place would not be helpful to anyone, because we would essentially be doing it all by hand in NRP with the same resources that should be out there enforcing, and we would probably come up with inaccurate numbers.
Mr. Chairman, someone from the Maryland Builders on.
Before
Oh,
we ask if someone from the Builders is on, I saw Delegate Amprey. You had a question?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for Tyler. My question is, what is the rate of suspected violations in comparison to, like, how many suspected violations turn into actual violations? Like, what is that number? That would also help me feel comfortable, or less comfortable. It'll help me get some more clarity on how many allegations are there being brought forward in comparison to how many allegations turn into actual violation.
I would be happy to get you a percentage as much as I can find.
Can you give me a ballpark? Is it like, are there tons of allegations? And there's, like what's
we receive a bunch of allegations, I believe. So, and all of these then get vetted, and we do look into these allegations. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's in like the 30% range,
that,
but
that end up actually being violations.
yeah, that's what I believe. But I really need to get that number from our compliance to make sure.
Yeah, and that's just an estimate. I'll take that as an estimate. Thank you. That's all. That's all. I think my colleagues kind of already asked some of the questions that I was also going to ask. So we're all in the same spirit here.
Okay.
Okay, great. Delegate Gilchrist, you wanted to know if someone from the builders was here?
Right.
I'm
Is
here, Mr. Chairman.
that
Uh,
Mr. Ensign?
Yeah,
Okay.
Bob Enton,
Okay.
for the Maryland Building Industry Association. We got the amendments. I want to thank staff and thank the chairman for getting us the amendments this morning. And they really don't address any of our concerns with the bill whatsoever. Our concern is the same as Delegate Boyce's concern and kind of mirrors the questions that Delegate Gilchrist and Delegate Ampry asked. I'm not aware of any place at all under Maryland law where we publicly report alleged violations of any law. If I pick up the phone and I call MDE or I call DNR and I say, my neighbor, Mr. Jones, I think he's doing such and such. Now, based on what I tell them, they're either going to investigate it or not investigate it. They're either going to issue a citation or a violation notice or not issue a violation notice. But to just have the fact that someone made a phone call and alleged a violation, you could allege, that the runoff on my neighbor's property is going into the Chesapeake Bay. I live 60 miles from the Chesapeake Bay. So that's not going to be. And, it's you're going to say, well, where do you live? Well, thank you very much. And, now is that going to be reported in the context of the Building Industry Association for our developer clients? What worries us is, you get a community that doesn't want a development or wants to limit what's going on in their community with a development. They're going to flood MDE with phone calls and then be able to point, to say, look, according to MDE, there are, 200 alleged violations by, so-and-so. I don't think we wouldn't have a problem, I guess. Well, I still think it's unprecedented to have this type of reporting and public access, which goes far beyond anything I've ever seen in all my years of coming down to Annapolis for any client. But at least if you're going to pass it, it should be limited to findings that somebody's done something wrong. It's like, publishing, having a website where everybody who's charged with a crime, whether they're innocent or not, so later on you can find out they were acquitted. That doesn't help you. And as you go through it, I think the other thing that really bothers us is that it says you have to identify the entity by name. And according to the testimony, at least on the Senate side, in response to a question, it was clear that that's intended to say that if an individual is the alleged violator, then you don't give the name. But if it's an LLC or a corporation, you do. And that doesn't seem fair to us either. Most of our clients are LLCs. So those are our concerns. I'd be happy to furnish amendments that address our concerns.
Great. Why don't you do that? That would be great. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you so much. I'm not a lawyer, so I could be wrong about this, but aren't like criminal charges on case search where you can case search for a person's name and see what they were charged with?
I guess I am a lawyer, and I'll tell you that I look at case search, and you're right. You can go on case search, and you can search under somebody's name, and if they're a defendant in a criminal case, it'll pop up and it'll give you information about it. But it's not the kind of, I don't think it's at all the kind of findings that are here. I don't think it's a totally different thing. This is, I can tell you, it's going to generate in certain circumstances, a lot of complaints. But I would also tell you the fact that somebody called and said Bob Enton did such and such, that is not published anywhere.
I'm sorry. I think it is the same kind of thing where, if I'm trying to get a house, if I'm trying to rent an apartment and they're doing a background search and they search case search and find that I was charged with something, even if I'm innocent, they might deny me being rented that apartment because I was charged with something. And so it is much the same kind of thing.
Delegate Bob, excuse me, I'm going to intervene here. Delegate and Mr. Enton, let's not get into a debate about sort of the underlying policy or precedent. Let's just focus on the text of the bill and any amendments that anyone wants us to consider. So I will ask that Bob, as well as MDE, as well as anyone else who wants to have the subcommittee consider amendments to this bill, to please get them to me or get them to Council Kristen Flynn by I guess by next Tuesday for our Wednesday subcommittee.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And let's move on to House Bill 245. I'm sorry, 264. Delegate Charkoudian's bill on organics, recycling, composting. Again, we're just discussing this and the amendments that have been proposed so far. So, Kristen, I know the sponsor has a number of amendments. Could you review what those do?
Yes. So the sponsor submitted amendments that would alter the application of the bill. The amendments would exclude restaurants from the bill, and it would clarify that individual schools are covered by the bill, but school systems and the aggregate are not. The amendments clarify that the receiving facility must have the capacity to accept and process all of the person's food residuals and be willing to accept all of it. Finally, the amendments strike the requirement that MDE, in conjunction with other agencies, report on state properties regarding the suitability for use as organics recycling facilities. And there's a reprint included in the materials where you will see those changes made.
Right, and that last item, I guess that's section 4 of the bill, had contributed to the fiscal notes. Taking that out doesn't eliminate the fiscal note, but certainly does improve it. And Kristen, did I forward to you for distribution the map that the sponsor had provided to us of existing facilities?
Oh, I think you did, but I don't think I forwarded it. I can do that right now.
Okay. And that we don't need to look at it right now, but just for everyone's.
Okay. After the meeting, I'll circle back. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, one question that had come up is where are existing facilities that could accept this type of organic, residual items, so that we'd have a sense as to, well, where we're talking about 2, we're talking about 5, whatever. So it does give us a good sense. Though I think in a couple of cases, it's not clear if they would take food scraps, the type of organic residuals that I think is contemplated by this bill. Okay, so questions about or discussion about this bill, what the amendments do. And again, I think it's worth noting that the sponsors agreed to exclude restaurants. That was something that had come up and there was concern about, especially given the economic impact of COVID of including restaurants. So they're taken out. But questions or discussion? This bill, Delegate Boyce.
I think Delegate Ruth was before me. Go ahead, Delegate Ruth.
Okay, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you. My question was partially answered because I was going to ask why restaurants were excluded. And I guess you're saying because of the business impact?
Yes.
So what is included then? Just schools?
No, you would have, and I'll defer to Kristen on this, but you would have any institutional food user on a large scale. So you could have universities, hospitals, you would have commercial operators that prepare meals, as examples. Kristen, I don't know if I've left off any sort of.
Yeah, that's correct. It covers that. And it's based on the amount of food residuals that those entities generate each week. So it phases in, for beginning January 1st, 2023, it would apply to a facility that generates at least 2 tons of food residuals each week. And then the following year in 2024, it would apply to a facility that generates at least 1 ton of food residuals each week.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if we're excluding restaurants, that this bill is still going to be able to have enough of an impact to accomplish its goal, you know, of starting to create those markets for the food residuals. Thank you.
Yeah, Delegate, I mean, that's a fair question. I can't speak of, you know, say if you look at other states where restaurants have been included, you know, what percentage of the impact have restaurants had in terms of generating the volume of organic residuals. My guess is that there would still be substantial amount of material that's generated, but you know, perhaps we can find out what's happened in other states. So Delegate Boyce and then Delegate Otto.
I just kind of want to go off of Delegate Ruth's question. You know, the sponsor mentioned during the hearing, if I can remember correctly, how she mentioned like what a ton is. And so on one hand, it sounds like a restaurant, even the best restaurant, not in COVID, would meet that quote unquote tonnage. And so I question the effectiveness of it even in that regard. But also what I'm slightly concerned about is if we find that there are only 2 or 3 facilities, I only know the facility per where my compost goes. But if there's let's say there's 4, and none of them are in the distance, the 20 to 30 mile distance from someone who is creating that tonnage, do they then get to opt out and not even have to then kind of use the composting? So I'm worried about this working as it relates to the number of facilities that we even have in the state. It's just a thought, like, you know, I mean, we know we want more, but then we also know the not in my neighborhood unfortunate debate as well. And so I am very curious about where they are, the number of them, and then who would willy-nilly just take that tonnage, and what would that cost be to them? Because there is a cost. There has to be a cost to that whoever's hauling it. And so I'm just curious about that.
Sure. No, good question. I think the map that Delegate Charkoujian has provided will help in terms of at least current locations.
Is it in the testimony?
No, it's not. It's something that she sent to us afterwards, and so Kristen has forwarded to you.
Find it. Kristen doesn't have to do that. I can find it.
You know what? I will have to forward to you. I don't think you have it in your materials. I don't think it was uploaded anywhere. I'll get it to you. I can send it now if that would be helpful to the discussion.
Sure.
Yeah, and you know, the question about cost, I mean, there is I think the delegate at the sponsor has language in here that says that even if someone generates the tonnage is within 30 miles of one of these facilities, if the cost is not reasonably competitive with the cost of alternative disposal, then they're exempt. Now, what does reasonably competitive mean?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I was going to say competitive in that it's not, you know, again, let me put it out there. I am a composter. I've been composting for almost 10 years, 8 of them by myself. But I also worry about the infrastructure, right? It's like anything else. It's going to be more now because there's not that many, you know, supply and demand. And so again, I do worry about the cost, in that it's probably going to be just as much, if not more, because there's not a plethora of facilities in the state.
No, that's true.
All right, I digress.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
I think most of my concerns have been shared here by the other members of the committee, but you know, my concern is an unfunded mandate. to our school systems and things like that. And also, I'd rather incentivize practice. Now, I'm for composting and handling things in that fashion, but instead of mandates and creating hardships on things, and I wanted a revised physical note so that we do know what are we implying. I think that map will be helpful if we know where the facilities are, and I just don't know that we need to go this route this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think the map is helpful. So
I
everyone
just sent
can
that
take,
through, so, I mean, you can look at it later, but it just should, you'll have it in your inbox.
yeah, and Delegate Amprey, did I see? Yes.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I know the restaurants are now being excluded, and I have concerns there as far as some of our bigger restaurants and the impact that will have. But the question that I raised in the in the committee meeting was food halls. So I know that restaurants are excluded, but with food halls, are food halls a restaurant under the definition here of excluding restaurants? Because I know food halls are under one, under one roof. So I know that, some of our food halls, as they expand in size, I know they're not doing as well as they would do outside of the pandemic, but I still get plenty. I've got plenty of meals from my food halls. So I'm worried that they have a large amount of food and tonnage. So just want to know if they would be included or excluded here. And that's a concern that I have. And also thinking about malls who have food halls and so forth. Are they now being excluded because they're within a mall and not, or are they being excluded because they are a restaurant individually? Although they're within a facility such as a mall. So that's the question or concern that I have.
Sure. Kristen, any thoughts on that? I really don't know off the top of my head what the answer to that would be.
If something would be considered a restaurant, it would, with the amendments, it would be excluded from the bill, no matter how much that restaurant generated. There's not a definition provided for restaurant, but anything that would be considered a restaurant would not come under the bill.
So yes, yeah. So yeah. So, and also, I guess also like like a public market, right? So like Lexington Market, or we have a lot of public markets here in Baltimore that I imagine have a lot of organic food waste. But if you're within the confines of a restaurant inside of the market, how does that play? So like Fadley's is like within a market. So they're a restaurant though, right? So I don't know. So some more, I think we need some more defining language there to help me understand that. So I'm adding markets to the public markets to that question.
So Delegate, I guess your specific concern as to whether food halls, markets like Lexington Market would be covered within the definition of restaurants or not.
Right. Yeah. My concern is they actually do create, again, your average, sit down restaurant, a Chipotle, for example, like they're not going to produce maybe as much tonnage. I don't know, the ones near college might, but they might not produce enough tonnage, but I'm pretty sure Lexington Market would produce enough. And I'm concerned that by excluding restaurants or not having a better carve out here, some of our big organic waste producers would be able to skirt the law here.
Sure. Okay. I guess we can look into that for the next meeting. Are there questions? Let's see. Or does any subcommittee member have a question for an advocate?
I just looked at the map, and there's 10 facilities. They're not, hold on, let me lower my screen. It's kind of hard. I can pull this over. Big screen, hold on 1 second. So there's 10, and I'd be curious if an advocate would know this about the distance of whether any part of Maryland, because it all seems to be very centralized in Maryland. What is the closest kind of like food hall or farm or business that is generating a certain tonnage that would meet the requirements of this distance? Because I see 1, 2, 3. They're pretty spread out and yet centralized and yet. Does anybody know? So in other words, who would be directly affected? That would definitely not only meet the tonnage, but also would be in proximity to any 10 of these.
Okay. Pam,
Anybody know that?
Pam, is that something that you can help with, Pam Casemeyer?
Well, I think all I can do, well, I have to turn my video on, sorry. I think all that I can do is say there's not going to be an easy answer to that question, because the other issues, the capacity for the facility. So there's an issue there too, and concern, and I raise these from the Holland community side, not so much that we're opposed to separating out food waste, but just from a technical perspective, from the transportation side of things. The bill says that the facility has the capacity to take it. Each facility has so much capacity per day or per whatever, but I'm not sure how one guarantees that except the really maybe super large facilities, of which there aren't many, you're always going to be sure that your capacity actually can be accepted that particular day. And then you have contamination issues. So the facility may have the capacity, but if the hauler arrives and the contamination is too great, then they will reject the load and you'll have to take it to disposal. So I think there's some questions about, does that create a compliance issue for the generator, or is there a cost issue that's hard to calculate because that contamination issue becomes problematic? And in terms of who would be affected and do they have a facility near them, you'd have to weigh in the volume capacity of the facility, not just that it's there. Because if you have a small facility that can only take so much and you have multiple generators in the same area, I don't know how you determine which it applies to, or it applies to all of them, but I don't know that they can say we can't always take it there. It's a little complicated.
So, okay, thanks, Pam. So Doug, and maybe I can ask the sponsor if, based on her knowledge of the location of the facilities, or maybe at least a few that she knows are right now, there are establishments that would be subject to the bill based on tonnage that they generate. Would that help to know which locations, at least she's aware of, would bring a number of other organic residual producing establishments in the ambit of the bill? So, okay. Well,
yes, that would be helpful personally for me. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's see. Anyone else want to ask a question about this bill? Okay. All right. How is everyone on time? Delegate Stewart, do you have a few minutes?
I think I probably have about like 5 or so minutes before
Okay.
I have 5 minutes as well.
5 minutes. Okay, great. All right. Last bill on the list is House Bill 407. This was the less controversial of the two septics related bills I had. This deals with licensing of property transfer inspectors. And I do have an amendment which is included in your packet. It changes sort of the metric for enforcement for penalties. This is on the reprint, page 3, subsection F2. Initially, we said that each day that someone who is not licensed constitutes a separate violation. That's been changed to each septic system that someone who's not licensed inspects is a separate violation. So I have that amendment. but do folks have questions? Okay, so no questions I'm hearing?
So this is just an inspection on the when the property
On the-
exchanges hands.
That's right. Yeah. All right, well then, hearing no questions, I will move the amendment.
Second.
Second. Okay. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the bill as amended.
Move the bill.
Okay, I'll second it. All those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Look at us.
All
We
right.
got something done today.
Yeah, we did. We did. And so we'll, so we passed HB 76 and 407, both with amendments. We held the other bills, House Bill 333, we'll take up with, focus on that particular item about de minimis activities. And then 204 and 264, the number of questions, and I know at least 204, there'll be a number of proposed amendments for us to take a look at. So we'll start off next week with those. And speaking of next week, do you want to try again Wednesday at 11? Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
Sounds good.
Wednesday 11 it is. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in bill hearings. Okay.
Yep.
Bye-bye.